Dr. Alan Desmond. Dr. Desmond is a good friend of mine. He is an advocate for plant-based gut health. He is a consultant gastroenterologist in the UK. He's originally from Ireland, but he works in a town called Devon in the UK. And he's also a member of the Royal College of Physicians in the UK. He is an author of an excellent book called The Plant-Based Diet Revolution. If you haven't checked it out, you absolutely should. From my perspective, Alan is someone who's out there beating the drum and sharing the message that I'm trying to get out there as well. And I'm very, very excited to have him as a part of the Empowered Gut Summit. So welcome, Dr. Alan Desmond.
Hey folks, Dr. Alan Desmond here. Welcome to my clinic, and thank you to Will for inviting me to be a part of this incredible Empowered Gut Summit. So excited to be here. I'm going to try and keep this thing to about 25 minutes, and let's get started. Today, I'm going to give you a detailed, somewhat academic look at the evidence to answer a really, really important question: bowel cancer risk, diet, and the gut microbiome. What do you need to know? Now, this is a diagnosis, a disease that is so common, everybody should be aware of bowel cancer risk, particularly in high-income countries. Let's explain why. If you enjoy my content today, I would love to connect with you online. You can find me on Instagram, Dr. Alan Desmond. You can learn more about my book, The Plant-Based Diet Revolution, which is available in all good bookstores. You can even join me on my Gut Health Revolution online course, which I run with an amazing dietitian, Rosie Martin, amazing plant-based chefs, Stephen David Flynn. We would love to have you. So anyway, that's me on Instagram or buy the book, real, virtual, in print. Would love to connect with you. So let's go. Bowel cancer, okay? Bowel cancer, the third most common cancer diagnosed in both men and women in the United States. This is a really common cancer. I'm sure you know somebody who's been affected. Someone in your family, a friend, a family member, maybe you've been affected by this cancer. It's so common, affecting about 1 in 23 men and 1 in 25 women in their lifetime. We have 150,000 people diagnosed with bowel cancer each year in the United States, sadly, and it remains the second leading cause of cancer death. In that little window there, this is what we see all too often at colonoscopy. You've got a malignant polyp, a malignant tumor. This is what we don't want to see, but what we frequently see in the endoscopy room. As part of my job, I frequently have to tell people that I've just diagnosed them with bowel cancer as I talk them through the results of the colonoscopy that I've just completed. I may have this conversation 3 or 4 times a week with a patient where I sit down and explain that I've just diagnosed them with bowel cancer. This is a life-changing conversation. Even if we get the diagnosis early with a 90% cure rate, we know that this is going to be a major source of stress and anxiety for the individual. They may be looking at chemotherapy, they may be looking at surgery. For them and their family, their life has been changed forever. And every time I have this conversation with a patient, I walk out of the room thinking, number one, 1 million people have this conversation every single year around the world. And also, what can we do to prevent it? Now, in terms of bowel cancer, we have seen worrying trends globally for several years. The global burden of colorectal cancer is increasing as we embrace the global standard diet. The global Western diet becomes absolutely endemic in countries all around the world. We have known for many years that colon cancer is more common in high-income countries. And what we see shown on this graph here on the right is that even if you go looking for bowel cancer in sub-Saharan Africa and other countries that haven't embraced the standard Western diet, it's very rare. But bowel cancer is incredibly common in Western Europe, high-income North America, Australasia, etc. There is a huge disparity in rates of cancer between countries. And as more and more countries become higher income and move to the global standard diet, or standard American diet, we expect that colon cancer rates are going to keep rising every single year. In fact, between 2019 and 2030, expected to rise to 2.2 million new cases and 1.1 million deaths every single year due to this cancer. So that's worrying global trends. We've also seen worrying trends in the United States and Europe. We've known for many years in Europe that the rates of bowel cancer are increasing in young people, people who would traditionally be too young to have bowel cancer screening. Even in patients aged 20 to 39 years, we've seen rates increasing year and year. In the United States now, with this disease, which used to be considered a diagnosis of older folks, 1 in 8 cases is diagnosed in an individual under the age of 50. Chadwick Boseman, the Hollywood actor, sadly passed away in 2020, aged just 43, having been diagnosed with colorectal cancer aged 39. At the bottom left, we have Dame Deborah James, Bowel Babe, a huge campaigner for bowel cancer awareness here in the United Kingdom. Sadly, Dame Debs passed away last year at the age of 40, having been diagnosed with bowel cancer. Each person in this picture represents 1,000 people in the United Kingdom who will be diagnosed with bowel cancer in the next year. Represents 3,000 people who will be diagnosed with bowel cancer in the US in the coming 12 months. Well, what can we do about it? This is an evidence-based statement. The majority of bowel cancer cases can be prevented by a healthy diet and lifestyle. When we look at scientific evidence, we have a hierarchy of scientific evidence. Today, I'm going to be showing you some science. I'm going to be keeping at the top of this pyramid as much as possible, looking at meta-analyses and systematic reviews. Occasionally, we'll go to cohort and case control data, but really we want to stay up at the top of the pyramid so you know that what I'm telling you is evidence-based. Let's talk about food. It is so important. Food, fiber, dietary fiber. I've spelled it the way we spell it on this side of the Atlantic, right? Fiber, F-I-B-E-R, maybe for Will. So fiber, dietary fiber, does it protect us from bowel cancer? Absolutely. So when we look at 5 meta-analyses, high-quality studies conducted over 28 years, people in high-income countries who eat the most fiber reduce their risk of colorectal cancer by up to 24%, right? No surprise here. More fiber, more plants, more short-chain fatty acids, more phytonutrients, more antioxidants, and we see a beneficial dose-response curve. For every extra 10 grams of whole grain fiber per day, we see the risk of bowel cancer going down by up to 17%. We don't quite know from these big studies about how much fiber we should eat, what's the optimal consumption. And one of the limitations for these studies is because they're done in high-income countries, often in these studies, the fiber intake of the participants will range from a measly 6.3 grams up to 21.4 grams per day, which means that most people in these studies aren't even getting close to the 30 grams recommended minimal intake. So how about lovely fruits, veggies, and legumes? Are these associated with reduced risk? Absolutely. Fruits, vegetables, especially legumes, are great sources of healthy plant-based protein, vitamin E, vitamin B, selenium, lignans, all of these anti-cancer components that we can get in your diet. And we know, again, from meta-analyses that in high-income countries, people who have the highest intakes of vegetables are substantially less likely to get bowel cancer. People who are high consumers of legumes and cabbage and cruciferous vegetables in one meta-analysis reduce the risk by up to 24%. And again, folks, we have got a dose-response curve. For every 200 grams of fruits and vegetables eaten per day, the risk goes down by about 22%. Just 200 grams. 200 grams of fruit is an apple. 1 apple a day to keep the oncologist away when it comes to bowel cancer. I want to give a special shout out to soybeans. For some reason, such a controversial topic, okay? Soybeans are good for us. They are so good for us. What do they do to our bowel cancer risk? Well, soybeans seem to be particularly beneficial. They have all the benefits of other beans and legumes, plus other components, isoflavones, which may act on other pathways to reduce bowel cancer risk. Now, the data on this is really interesting because we've got studies from the US, Europe, and Japan. So we've got low consumers of soy foods plus high consumers of soy foods, which is really, really useful because what we can detect from these studies in these different populations is that eating soybeans on the regular may reduce the risk of colorectal cancer by up to 27%. For my UK audience, when I give this study, I show them some pictures of some plain soya yogurt, some tofu, and of course, the humble edamame bean, these young soybeans that you can buy in the produce section at your local supermarket. Now, when we put all this together, when we look at big data, the European Prospective Investigation into Cancer, we see the same thing. More plants equals less bowel cancer. Big data, 10 countries, 1.9 million years of person follow-up. low fiber intake is an independent risk factor for bowel cancer, regardless of alcohol, cigarettes, family history. Low fiber intake increases your risk. And in Europe, higher consumers of fiber are 42% less likely to develop bowel cancer. And if we could get low fiber consuming populations in Europe to double their fiber intake, get from 20 to 40 grams, we could reduce the risk of colorectal cancer across all of Europe by 40%. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Now, here's a question that I'm asked a lot as a gastroenterologist who recommends a healthy, whole food, plant-based, dairy-free diet. Are dairy foods protective? Should I be telling people to consume dairy to reduce their risk of bowel cancer? Well, 3 observational meta-analysis combined over 2012 to 2017. When we put all the data together, again, we've got big data here, 434 high-quality studies included. Any 400 grams per day increase in dairy associated with a reduced risk of cancer. But it's important to look here at the data. The benefits are limited to milk consumption, not yogurt, not cheese, not kefir, it's milk. So why is milk reducing the risk of bowel cancer? Well, the number one theory is that it's about calcium, because adequate dietary calcium helps to reduce some of the pro-carcinogenic effects of an unhealthy diet, binding the carcinogenic secondary bile acids and ionized fatty acids that we get when we're eating a lot of animal fat and animal protein and a high-fat diet. We've seen studies before, like the Nurses Health study, Health Pressures follow-up study, showing that if you're getting more than 700 milligrams of calcium per day, you have a significantly reduced risk of bowel cancer. So the advice that I give to my patients is, why not up your calcium and your fiber and your legumes at the same time with beans, greens, dates, calcium set tofu, and get this triple hit of cancer prevention. Also, I'm aware that the consumption of dairy products, including whole milk, has been implicated in increasing the risk of other cancers, including breast cancer and prostate cancer, which are more common cancers. And just like me, the World Cancer Research Fund, in their advice to reduce your risk of colon cancer, they make this statement: because we are unsure about the effect on other cancers, we don't make any recommendation on dairy. So we don't recommend increasing dairy to reduce your bowel cancer risk. How about fish and omega-3 oils from fish? Well, this has been studied in detail, and when we put all the data together, the best we can say is that the data is conflicting. Disparate results. We don't know if fish increases the risk or decreases the risk or is neutral. I think the best we can say is that fish consumption is neutral. It's not going to reduce your risk. It's not going to increase your risk. Supplementing with omega-3s does not reduce your risk. We can say that pretty definitively from one of the largest randomized controlled trials ever performed, the UK seafood polyp prevention trial, which used 2 grams of fish throughout EPA every day. And despite being called the polyp prevention trial, we didn't prevent any polyps. It didn't work. And there are a ton of other things that you can take, mostly vitamin supplements, tea, selenium, garlic, vitamin D, vitamin C, vitamin E, which do not reduce your risk. It's all about the whole foods here, folks. Now, those are all the dietary components that reduce the risk. Let's look at the dietary components that increase the risk of bowel cancer. There's only 2. They are both shown in this picture. Here's a clue. It's not the tomato. Number 1, alcohol use. Alcohol, if you consider that part of your diet, is a dietary component that increases your risk. Again, a dose-response curve, but this is a harmful dose-response curve. As the alcohol use goes up, the risk of cancer goes up. Heavy drinkers, more than 4 drinks per day, increasing their risk by up to 58%. No surprise here, folks, alcohol is carcinogenic. And as this gentleman has just found out, the increased risk of alcohol consumption for bowel cancer is greater in males. The only other food component that is consistently shown to increase risk of bowel cancer is meat. Again, we've got a dose-response curve, but this is a harmful dose-response curve. For every 100 grams of total meat or red meat consumed per day, we see the risk of bowel cancer going up by up to 30%. We don't know what the threshold is. We don't know how little meat is safe to consume in terms of bowel cancer risk. Of course, this shouldn't surprise us. Back in 2015, the World Health Organization, International Agency for Research in Cancer, classed both processed meats like bacon, salami, sausages, hot dogs, and red meats like beef, lamb, and pork as carcinogens, known to increase the risk of bowel cancer in humans or probably increasing the risk of bowel cancer in humans. Of course, this is all about bowel cancer. That's the cancer they were talking about. And we know that when we look at UK data, that is borne out. So in the UK, the average person has about 75 grams per day of red and processed meat. According to Cancer Research UK, these two food groups alone cause approximately 8,800 of the 42,000 cases of bowel cancer diagnosed each year in the UK. Not alcohol, not fiber deficiency, not cigarettes, not genetics, simply red and processed meat in the UK, causing 8,800 cases of bowel cancer each year. But even though we've known that bacon is a class 1 carcinogen for years now, I'm still waiting for this warning to appear on packets of bacon, a strip of bacon a day. You can fill in the blank, okay? And this is so important because this is hot off the press from March. This is a paper highlighting the increased risks of bowel cancer in young people under the age of 50. As doctors, we like to classify things. So is early onset colorectal cancer different to late onset colorectal cancer? There may be some different genetic risk factors here at play, but in the middle, you see we have got a whole bunch of completely preventable shared risk factors: metabolic syndrome, sugar-sweetened beverages, red and processed meat, the Western dietary pattern, obesity, and prolonged sedentary behavior mean that bowel cancer is a common cancer at an uncommon age. We're seeing more and more of this in young people. So does it have to be like this? Well, our bowel cancer risk doesn't have to be high. We all know about the Seventh-day Adventists of Loma Linda, California, some of the healthiest people ever recorded, males living 11 years longer than the US average, females living 9 years longer than the US average. We've got, of course, the legendary Dr. Ellsworth Wareham here. Both of these individuals pictured on this slide are over 100 years of age, and at the time of these photographs, they were thriving and surviving. The Seventh-day Adventists placing a great emphasis on healthy living, community, and faith. Super healthy people, 65% less type 2 diabetes, 47% less stroke. What are they eating? Well, they eat a very pro-vegetarian diet. Even the Adventists who do eat meat eat very little meat, getting 95% of their calories from plants. Is their bowel cancer risk lower than the US average? Absolutely. Over a 7.3-year period, we saw that meat consumption was low and that Adventists were 30% less likely to develop colon cancer. Among the Adventists who did not consume any meat at all, 36% fewer cases of bowel cancer. Eating like this beautiful plant-based bowl instead of this. This is a standard British traditional breakfast. It's a big plate of foods that increase the risk of colorectal cancer. Of course, we also have this traditional meal, which is unfortunately now a traditional meal the world over, not just the US or the UK, but every country in the world pretty much you can find a meal like this. Just a few reasons why meats are so bad for gut health. Meat, particularly red and processed meat, great source of heme iron, which is directly carcinogenic. Then when you cook meat, you get these funky chemicals, HCAs and PAHs, which act to increase the risk of cancer. And then we got the nitrates that are naturally occurring in some of these meats, the nitrites and nitrates that are added to preserve processed meats. And you've got a perfect recipe for inflammation, DNA damage, and precancerous changes. And that's why we see all of this epidemiological data. But of course, it's also about the wonderful gut microbiome, the 100 trillion microbes that live in our digestive system. You know about the impact that the gut microbiome has on health. Of course, the gut microbiome largely lives in the colon and is an intimate interaction with the lining of the bowel where the bowel cancer emerges. This cartoon showing we've got a healthy bowel, going to a hyperproliferative bowel, going to an adenoma polyp, going to a cancer. At every step of this path, we have the gut microbiome interacting with the cells. So of course there is a role to play. The title of this paper, published in 2018, tells you what you need to know. The association of diet, gut microbiota, and colorectal cancer. What we eat may imply what we get. When we eat a meal of meat and animal fat and fiber deficiency, we are feeding our gut microbes with the residual of bile acids, animal protein, hardly any fiber, hardly any polyphenols. We are choosing to feed the gut microbes that generate harmful secondary bile acids, ammonia, hydrogen sulfide gas. In short, we are building a gut microbiome that is conducive to chronic inflammation and conducive to colorectal cancer. But if we choose to take a different path, and we eat meals made from whole grains and vegetables and fruits and legumes and all that good stuff, we are now feeding our gut microbes a completely different residue. They are not getting the bile acids, they're not getting the animal protein, they're getting polyphenols and a diversity of fiber. We are now feeding the gut microbes that make the beneficial short-chain fatty acids, produce vitamins and phenolics and antioxidants. We're not getting the secondary bile acids. We're not getting so much hydrogen sulfide gas. We are choosing to build a gut microbial environment that is not conducive to chronic inflammation, that is not conducive to colorectal cancer. And in Nature 2019 published 2 huge studies looking at gut microbial signatures in patients with colorectal cancer versus people who didn't have colorectal cancer. The signals within the gut microbiome were consistent across multiple populations in multiple countries with multiple food cultures. The colorectal cancer microbiome is always substantially enriched with the bacteria that thrive on meat and fat, with fewer of the bacteria that metabolize fruits, vegetables, and starches. And when we look at this paper published in 2021, we look at these harmful bacteria, these pathobiont bacteria increased in colorectal cancer and IBD. What are the foods that increase them? Cheese, custard, animal protein, syrups, fat, cheese, yogurts, custard, animal protein, alcohol, meat, all the stuff that we know is associated with bowel cancer risk in real life. And the foods that reduce these harmful pathobiont bacteria: breads, legumes, plant protein, nuts, complex carbohydrates, fruits, breads, etc. Now, a few years ago, a group of researchers, 9 years ago now, put this to the test. They recruited 20 healthy African American adults from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, individuals living in a population with a high risk of bowel cancer, versus 20 volunteers from rural Africa. Bowel cancer, almost unheard of. What did they do? They did a colonoscopy on everybody. 45% of the Americans already had precancerous adenomas, and their gut microbiome signature was that of high colorectal cancer risk. Among the rural Africans, not one precancerous adenoma, incredibly, and the gut microbiome showed a low colorectal cancer risk profile. What did they do? Well, they looked at their food, they got them to swap their food, and for just 2 weeks, the Americans were getting 55 grams of fiber per day, with 70% of their calories from complex carbohydrates, eating a plant-predominant healthy whole food diet. And in just 2 weeks, they showed that the gut microbiome profiles flipped completely. The Americans now had a low risk profile, the Africans had a high risk profile. And not only did they show the gut microbiome structure and function changing, they also showed mucosal proliferation rates changing in both populations, reflecting the metabolic response to the food and the changes in the gut microbiome. A very complicated and interesting paper, but the intervention was administered in the kitchen. So, diet, lifestyle, and colorectal cancer. What should we tell our patients? I'm going to put it into just a couple of slides for you right now. The majority of cases of bowel cancer are preventable through a healthy diet and lifestyle. Only 5 to 10% of cases are due to hereditary syndromes. 90 to 95% of cases are sporadic due to the complex interplay between environmental factors, genetic susceptibility. Food matters. Do not smoke. Do not drink alcohol or minimize alcohol. When it comes to food, minimize your meat. Just push it off your plate, especially the red and processed. Maximize your fruits, your veggies, your whole grains, your legumes. Eat foods made from soybeans. Eat soybeans. Eat calcium-rich, fiber-rich foods. Prevention and early detection are so important. To take part in a screening program if you are lucky enough to have access to a screening program. In the US, that's a colonoscopy from age 45. In the UK, that's fit test from the age of 56, although we are moving to the age of 54 and lower because of the changing epidemiology of this cancer. Remember, low risk is not no risk. And if you have gut health symptoms and you are worried, please talk to your doctor and get checked. And yes, a whole food plant-based diet ticks all the right boxes for colorectal cancer prevention, and it's never too early or too late to make the change. A whole food plant-based diet, which if we could get everyone in the world to eat like that, We would also, as well as reducing colorectal cancer, prevent 12 million avoidable deaths every single year. That's quoting from the Eat Lancet report of 2019. Thank you so much, Will, for inviting me. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. We could have done like another half hour. Those of you with beady eyes, notice I skipped a couple of slides. Sorry, but I wanted to get this thing done within the time limit. Please connect with me online. Find me on Instagram. Point your phone at that barcode thing there in the middle of the screen, and you can connect with me on Instagram or on Linktree. And again, Will, thank you so much for inviting me. I can't wait to see you in person. Okay, take care, folks. Lovely to see you.